So I've noticed that a lot of the birth stories out there at the moment are either really empowered, positive, natural birth stories of unmedicated, beautiful, natural births, often at home, without an epidural, or people go public talking about their super traumatic, awful hospital birth with horrible things happening, and they sort of go public with it to debrief it or to warn others or etc. And I feel like there's kind of a middle ground missing out there within the birth stories that you could find out on YouTube, especially, to hear about just somebody who's had who's had a really positive, empowering hospital birth experience with an epidural, with pitocin, with an obstetrician. I did have a fair amount of intervention, relatively speaking, compared to like a home birth. And it was a beautiful, empowering, super positive experience for me and my partner. There's no right way to give birth. And if you're a first-time mom and you're feeling anxious and anticipating what birth's going to be like, I want to be able to normalize a spectrum of experiences for you. So that's what this video is about. I'm going to offer up a few tips at the end just to make your birth as empowering and meaningful as possible, no matter what type of birth you end up having or where or how much intervention or any of that. No matter what your birth looks like, it can be a meaningful, beautiful experience with great memories. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Liz. I am a registered nurse. Spoiler alert, I've worked in labor and delivery for most of my career. I'm also a meditation teacher and a coach, and this channel is all about mindfulness and intuitive living and holistic health. And I just wanted to talk about my birth story today, so here we are. So I consider myself to be a pretty naturalistic person. I really value holistic health. I think a lot of my colleagues at the hospital would call me granola. And even with that, I had a wonderful hospital birth experience with an epidural. So I want to normalize this for anybody who feels like it has to be one or the other, or like a certain type of woman has a certain type of birth, or that if you're a really strong, resilient woman, then you can do it naturally without any pain medication. I don't think that's helpful, and I don't think that's true. Every person is different. Every birth is different. Every pregnancy is so different. Like one person who has a supernatural, home birth for one pregnancy, the next pregnancy could go completely different and end up being like a C-section in the hospital. You don't know. So I think like when we sort of put ourselves in these boxes of like, I am this type of person, therefore it needs to go like this, it just creates all kinds of shame and guilt and regret and like these expectations and pressure that we just don't need. You do you. I think the most important thing is to listen to your body, listen to your intuition, do what's right for you and your family in the moment. Let's dive in. I'm going to get into the story here. I'm going to try and be as succinct as possible because I can get rambly about these things. So I had an obstetrician looking after me for my whole pregnancy. It's a colleague that I know and trust and have worked with for years, so that was a pretty easy choice for me. When I was 38 weeks and 2 days, my water broke at about 11 a.m. I think it was a Monday morning. And I knew my water had broken because it felt like I was like peeing myself, which I don't normally do. It felt like a teeny tiny little pop and then a little bit of wetness. So I was kind of like, did I just pee myself? And the fluid was clear. It looked like it could have been urine. I couldn't really tell. But for the next few hours, it kept happening a little bit on and off. So I thought I was feeling pretty confident that I think my water might have broken. Now the fluid was clear and baby was moving really well. and there weren't any other concerns. So I opted to stay at home for a few hours. I was texting my obstetrician, and the plan was to go into the hospital around the 12-hour mark, and do some monitoring baby, check the baby was well, that there weren't any issues, see if my water really had broken, etc. So that's what I did. So throughout the day, I went on did lots of walking, tried to do some exercises, bouncing on the ball. Like I was trying to do whatever I could to get myself into labor. It started a bit, contractions got more and more frequent. They weren't that strong. Like I could talk through them even by the time we left for the hospital. So we got to the hospital about 11 p.m. that night, and my contractions were like every 5 minutes apart, and I could talk through them, so they weren't that strong. They examined me, and I had in fact broken my water, so that was satisfying to hear. Like I hadn't just been peeing myself all day. And my contractions were like every 5 to 10 minutes at that point. So not, it wasn't a really strong pattern yet. So, and they suggested that because my water had been broken for 12 hours, that I be admitted and we start a little bit of pitocin, also known as oxytocin, to get labor moving a little bit more. The reason being that if you're in labor for if your water is broken for too long, it starts to increase the chance of getting an infection, because really your amniotic fluid sac, it's like the little protected home for your baby. It protects it from germs. And once that bag pops, then it enables germs to start getting in. So the longer it's exposed and your water's broken, the more chance you have of developing a fever during labor, or getting some type of an infection, or baby getting a fever or infection. So I was admitted around midnight, and had a wonderful nurse. She was super supportive, asked me what I felt like I wanted. Did I want an epidural? What did I feel like I wanted to try? And I said, I want to be open-minded about this. I feel like I've never had this experience before. I'm a first-time mom. I want to see what this feels like. I might want an epidural. I'm not sure. Let's just see how it goes. Let's start the pitocin and see how it goes. So that's what we did. So I started the pitocin. It goes through an IV, and it's on a little pump, and every half hour they increase it. And it starts really, really low. Like the whole point with the administering pitocin, we want it to mimic your natural oxytocin that's being produced by your own body. So you want it to mimic natural labor. We don't want to just like slam you with pitocin and suddenly like bam, contractions. That's not good for you or your baby. Not helpful. So the pitocin started super, super small amount at the beginning and just eased in. I didn't really notice a difference for the first little bit. And then the contractions started getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And sure enough, after a few hours, I was like, I just couldn't catch up with the pain anymore. It was so intense. There were no breaks, like it just was constant. And I knew that I hadn't progressed very much dilation wise. So I said, listen, I'm ready for my epidural. Let's do it. So I got an epidural around 3 or 4 a.m., something like that. And let me tell you, epidurals are awesome. It was like, it just felt so good. Like the stark contrast of how intense those contractions were, and then how relaxed and good I felt after I'd gotten the epidural and I just was able to sleep. Like it felt amazing. All the pain is suddenly gone. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Now, with that being said, there's some myths out there still that epidurals make you drowsy, or that they drug your baby, they make your baby drowsy. That's not true. Maybe epidurals back 30, 40 years ago, but nowadays the medications are pretty advanced and they don't cross into your bloodstream. They stay in your spinal fluid. So what that means is that they beautifully numb the nerves, but they're not going into your bloodstream and affecting the rest of your system. So they won't make you drowsy. They do not touch the baby. The baby is not getting drowsy at all from an epidural. It's not getting any of the epidural medication at all. So they're pretty fantastic. I gotta say, I am officially a big fan of the epidural. And then I got to have a lovely nap. It was like 3 or 4 a.m. and I was exhausted, and so was my partner. So we fell asleep. We slept for like 2 or 3 hours, and then I woke up and I started feeling contraction pain again, particularly in one hip. And I kind of was anticipating that might happen because I do have a bit of scoliosis in my back. My hips are a little twisted. So there's just like, I thought that, I knew from my experience as a nurse that it's possible like the epidural wouldn't have a very even coverage for me, like pain wise. And sure enough, after a few hours, I started feeling a lot of pain just in my left hip, just like contraction pain. I could feel the contractions again, just in my left hip. So they examined me, and I was about 6 centimeters at that point. So they said, all right, let's give you a little top up of your epidural, a little bit of extra to try and get to that left hip. So that's what they did. And lo and behold, within that like half an hour or so of getting a little epidural top up, I started feeling a lot more pressure and intensity low down in my pelvis, like pressure in my bum, rectal pressure, and like a sensation like I might want to push soon, which are all really good signs. It means things are progressing. And my nurse examined me, and sure enough, I was fully dilated. So everything was just ticking along beautifully. She emptied my bladder. With the epidural, you can't really get up to pee. You don't have the sensation to be able to like use your peeing muscles. They're numb, so you can't push the pee out. So she used a little catheter to empty my bladder before I started pushing, so that there was lots of room for baby to descend. So, I mean, I knew that was coming, and I was comfortable with that, and you don't feel it with the epidural. Honestly, you don't feel it at all. And then I started pushing around, I don't know, 6:30, and pushed for 45 minutes. My obstetrician was there. Baby was born beautifully after about 45 minutes, and everything was awesome. And when she was born, she came right up onto my chest. We were skin to skin. It's pretty standard practice nowadays that we want baby to go skin to skin with mom as soon as possible, like if possible, the moment they're born. So she came up onto my skin, dried her off there. She cuddled with me. We hung out. I think after 10 or 15 minutes, I got her breastfeeding because she was starting to open her mouth and look for the boob. So I got her breastfeeding, and all the time my obstetrician was stitching me up a little bit. I had a sort of smallish tear, which is pretty normal for your first baby. There's sort of like, we call it a 2nd degree tear. A 1st degree tear is like just sort of a skin graze. 2nd degree tear is like just a little bit deeper, needs a few stitches. 3rd degree is even deeper into the tissues, needs quite a few stitches. 4th degree is like, it's quite a deep tear, goes actually down into your rectum. Those ones are pretty nasty, unfortunately. But yeah, I had a 2nd degree tear. She stitched me up. Baby was skin to skin with me. We started breastfeeding. It was beautiful. And the epidural was working wonderfully. So I didn't feel a thing with the stitches. I just was able to relax and breastfeed. It was pretty wonderful, honestly. Like, my partner was so happy. We'd had a little rest, so we felt really good. That's one awesome benefit of the epidural, is like you do often get a rest during our labor, which is kind of a wonderful thing. And then once all the stitching was done, the epidural was turned off. And about an hour after that, once I'd finished breastfeeding, baby had fallen asleep, then they took the epidural out of my back, and I got up to pee. Got up and was able to go and pee. My legs had, thawed out. They weren't numb anymore. And I peed on my own. So it was pretty smooth sailing. I gotta say, it was a very, I don't want to say smooth experience, because to some people maybe that wouldn't be a smooth experience, like all those things that were needed. But to me, it was like beautiful. It's like, it was a ride. It was an adventure. I got to experience different things. I had a beautiful birth. I was healthy. I was doing what I needed to do. Baby was healthy. We were happy. We had great memories, and that felt like that was all that mattered. My husband was taking pictures. He was pretty deer in the headlights because he'd never seen a birth before. He didn't know what to expect, even though, I do this for a living and I come home with stories and stuff. It was still super new for him. So, he had a really positive experience, and he was very reassured and felt safe that we were there in the hospital, and we had everyone there to support us if it was needed. It was just like a pretty satisfying experience. And as a nurse, I can tell you the majority of people do have that experience. In hospitals, in major city centers these days, the majority of women do have an epidural. A lot of them do receive a little bit of pitocin to kind of get labor started or get labor moving when it slows down. And most women go home after 24 hours, if all is well and healthy with mom and baby. So I hope that this was helpful and informative, and just shed light on another type of birth experience that is possible. And whatever it is that you are, wanting for yourself and your baby, what I want for you is that you can find a way to make it meaningful and joyful and special and empowering, no matter what your birth looks like or where it is. So my number one tip to you is to go into your birth experience with the mindset of, no matter what happens, I'm going to create meaning out of this experience, and I am going to find the beauty and wonder in whatever happens. Make that decision for yourself now, in advance. It really goes a long way. And because, at the end of the day, we can't control labor. Most of the time, it is a beautiful, normal physiologic process that just kind of happens the way nature intended, and your body knows what to do. Occasionally, little things go wrong and you need help, and it's not the way you anticipated. And when that happens, the best mindset you can have is to just ride the wave. Just let it be part of the adventure, another piece of the adventure, and look at it with sort of wonder and amazement of oh, interesting, that's part of my birth story. Wow, cool. And appreciate just those moments, those first moments with your baby, and that you and your baby are healthy, and that you are, able to go through this experience. So that's my number one tip, is try to just prepare yourself with the mindset of, I'm going to create meaning out of this experience, and it's going to be beautiful no matter what. My second tip for you is, I'm a big fan of educating yourself. Read lots of stuff, all different range of things, not just from one type of expert. Read things from the whole spectrum of different types of birth experts and different types of birth experiences, so that you know what's going to happen, what could happen, what's possible, and what you might want, what types of things you value, what you would like to happen, if possible. Make a birth plan if that feels right for you. It can be a really powerful thing, empowering thing to make a birth plan. But if you're someone that just knows yourself and you tend to overthink things, and it just ends up kind of almost creating more anxiety or more of a sense of needing to control things, maybe don't make a birth plan. Go into it with the mindset of I'm going to go with the flow and listen to what feels right for me and my family in that moment. Honestly, I didn't have a birth plan, and that felt like the most powerful thing that I could do, was just to go into it with an open mind and enjoy the process. And I find that that's true for a lot of my patients, that the ones who have the most fulfilling experience are the ones who just go into it with whatever happens, happens. I'm going to enjoy the ride, and I'm going to just try and make this the most empowering experience it can be for myself. Know yourself, educate, Plan to the extent that it feels right for you and that it feels empowering for you. And then after all that, take a deep breath and let it all go and surrender to the process. You can't control exactly what's going to happen in your birth. You can wish for things, you can know what your preferences are, but you can't control everything that's going to happen. And the more you try to control everything that's going to happen, the more unhappy and disappointed you will be in the end, which is just, it's not helpful for you or your mental health or your baby. At the end of the day, just try and create meaning from whatever experience you have. My third tip is to advocate for yourself. And when I say that, I mean like just in the little moments as you're going along. It doesn't have to be some big confrontation. I mean like just moment to moment. If there's something that your care provider is doing repeatedly that just rubs you the wrong way and you wish it was a little different, speak up. Just say, hey, listen, I prefer if you actually would do something more like this. Could you do, is that possible? Or like, that actually bothers me. Do you think you could do it more like this? The worst case scenario is they say no, and here's why. At least you asked. The worst thing is having regret after birth. So the more you can just ask questions and speak up in those little moments when things just rub you a little bit the wrong way, the more fulfilling, empowered experience you're gonna have. You don't wanna wait until everything builds up. Sorry, there's a loud car. You don't wanna wait until everything builds up and it ends up being this big confrontation where you're really unhappy and you feel like you have to stand up for yourself. Speak up along the way in just little ways. So that would be my third biggest tip. As a nurse myself, I love it when my patients tell me what they prefer, what they want, and when something's bothering them, because then I can make the experience even better for them. I can make it even more personal to who they are and what they want. So don't be afraid to speak up every little moment along the way. It doesn't hurt. Even if the answer is no, at least you tried. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap it up there for now. I hope this was valuable for some of you and just give you a different idea of like what's possible in the birth experience and what a hospital birth often looks like for the majority of women who are having healthy, uncomplicated births. It can be a really positive experience. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. I would love to chat. And I wish you all the best with your birth and with what you're going through. I hope that you have a beautiful experience, whatever it is, however it looks. And I will see you in my next video. Mwah! Lots of love.